Welcome to the InfoSec Insider podcast, brought to you by URM, the UK's leading information and cybersecurity specialists.
Hi, my name's Annie and I'm here today with Aimee Brown and Rachel Salter, who are both consultants with us at URM. Welcome to another episode of InfoSec Insider Talk DP. So today we're going to be looking at the next 12 months in privacy, so looking at things like AI, monitoring, DSARs and enforcement. So the first question for you guys is, what do you think will define privacy risk over the next 12 months?
Well, the obvious answer is AI, isn't it? That's what people perceive as the risk, but I don't think AI itself is necessarily the biggest risk. I think it's how fast moving the environment is, how fast moving the data use is for companies to try and keep up with. And if they've not got the strong enough controls in place in the first place, if they've got weaknesses and failures within their existing data protection practices, then I think that's where the real risk lies with AI and some of the other technologies coming through, is that suddenly they find themselves in a position of non-compliance or in a position where the ICO might be knocking on the door to have a look at them. What do you think, Rachel?
Yeah, I think the issue is, for us being practitioners, we see even now, how many years after GDPR came in 2018, a number of clients and organisations we work with still don't have their house in order, and AI is moving faster than they can catch up. So, like Aimee said, there's always been something in the legislation around about evidence of compliance, Article 5.2, all around. It's all well and good having shiny policies, it's all well and good having training and having things in place, but if you don't evidence that compliance, and I think, as Aimee said, the ICO now is probably going to be squeezing people and saying, it's not enough to have that, I want to see your compliance, I want to understand that you truly know what you're doing. And I think I still work with a number of clients that don't have decent retention schedules, they don't have their process mapped out, they don't know where all the data is in their business. Even all these years post GDPR, they're still not there yet. So I think with AI, that's going to cause them a bigger headache.
Yeah, well, I think many organisations thought back in 2018 when GDPR arrived, they went, right, okay, done that, tick that box.
Yep.
Only need to do it one time exercise. But they don't realise that with the changes like Brexit changes, the DOA changes, the goalposts have been moving little by little over the last few years, and the consequences of getting it wrong have been increasing. It's no longer 500k, it's now 4% potentially. Yeah. And not just within the GDPR, but within the PECA, that they thought that they'd got the box ticked, and actually they haven't. And those things that they started doing in 2018 weren't strong enough and don't hold up anymore against the environment that they're working in now.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I think they literally did just see it as a tick box exercise. Done that, got that t-shirt, forgot about it, and have got sloppy. Certainly I've been asked to go back to some clients that we worked with in 2018, and they were in a good place then, but they've just let it slip because they just think, well, we've got policies, everyone gets trained every year, that's enough. It's not enough, because like Aimee says, the landscape is constantly changing, and as case law comes to light, things are changing. People are challenging the legislation, and new things are afoot. The legitimate interest assessment issue over from the doer, and the PECA fines, everything's changing. If you're not keeping a breadth of that, you're going to get caught blindsided, I think, aren't you? The ICO is definitely hotting up. If you look at the fines and things they're doing.
Yeah, and keeping your viewpoint too narrow. As we've said, we've mentioned AI, but we've not mentioned monitoring tools, connected systems, always on devices, smart devices, bring your own, which we've talked about before. Your third party suppliers, what are they doing with your data? Where are they storing it? Things like that. The landscape is just growing continuously. And if you only narrow your view down to that one point, AI is coming, we need to look at AI. No, you need to look at the bigger picture. You need to look in a broader landscape.
Yeah, no, definitely, I agree.
So sort of just continuing on that question around AI, why will AI continue to expose weak data protection practices?
I think from what Aimee just said, it's moving so fast, isn't it? We just can't keep. It's like you buy a laptop on a Monday and by Friday it's out of date, right? Because the landscape's changing so quickly.
It's just exploded, hasn't it? Especially in the fact that it's now integrated in so many systems. I mean, look at Microsoft. You've now got Copilot. It's in Word, it's in Excel, it's in your emails, it's just in your laptop, whether you want it there or not, really. You can take it off to a point. And it's just become so much more accessible. And then the widespread use of it has increased rapidly over the last 12 months or so. That the organisations are struggling to keep up, even though they're encouraging the rollout of it. They're rolling it out really quickly through these integrated systems, but without realising the consequences of, the impact of, where their data's going, what's happening with the data, who's putting what data in.
The other thing as well, and I have this conversation weekly, is the accuracy of some AI. You know, I mean, I talk to people regularly around just simple tools like chat, and they just put their whole life through it, and they are accepting whatever it's churning out as fact. And, you know, I've actually had an argument with chat. It's amazing actually how intelligent it is, but it doesn't know everything and it isn't always right. And it can be quite a challenge. That scares me a little bit, that I know people that are solely relying on that for work, for sorting out their social lives, sorting out anything that they want to know. They're using it to fact check things like best mortgages, cheapest car loans, whatever it might be. But it's a machine, right? You know, and it's how do you check its validity?
And
That's
also legal queries. I know somebody who's using it to help them get through family legal challenges, and they're putting in lots of personal sensitive data and using the outcomes from the questions they're asking the AI bot in their legal challenges in court, and you're thinking,
wow, just wow.
Yeah.
Imagine relying on that. Imagine going to law school for 7 years for nothing when you can just get it through chat, right? But I get it, because I think chat is a cheap or almost free solution, depending on what you've signed up for. But it doesn't make it good or right. It's a bit scary, really.
As we found with the DSART side of things, it's the nuances that it doesn't pick up. It's those little changes in it's not black and white, it's grey, and you need that oversight to understand those grey areas, that nuance within the case, whether it be a data protection, whether it be a family law, whether it be whatever. The regulations and the legislations, you've got experts in that area for a reason, because it's not just a straight line.
It can't read context though, can it, Aimee? That's the problem. No. You know, you could look at a paragraph of data and we would totally know where it was coming from because of the context that's written around that. But what AI is looking for is people or names or addresses or something factual. It doesn't understand emotion or, you know, it's got no context to work with. So it is just a machine. That's why that's why I think there'll always be a need for human intervention in everything. You can't, they say, like you say, it's not black and white, is it? And the machine expects it to be black and white. It's either there's something in there or it isn't. But we know as humans, when we're working with DSARs especially, that there is a massive grey area.
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier the accountability part of the GDPR as well. And with AI, you've also got explainability. So if you are using AI within your organisation in a way that affects your people or other data subjects, like your customers, for example, not only do you need to be accountable and be able to show the regulator why, how, where, what, but it needs to be explainable. So you need to understand your AI system that you're relying on to make those decisions as well, to a point that you can explain it to whatever regulator's coming into audit.
I think it's been seen as an easy solution. It's got a place. It's got a place. You know, it is a great tool in some instances, AI. But you know, I think the problem is I don't think a lot of my clients aren't able to harness it properly, aren't using it correctly to its full potential. Safely, that's the other thing, safely, you know, like you just said, Aimee, about people putting their, how easy it is. They don't turn off the feeding into everyone else in the rest of the world. You put your information in, all of a sudden, you know, everyone's got access to that. You're feeding into a massive database. There's some really sensitive stuff goes in there. I've seen clients do it and I'm like, why would you put all of that in there?
Well, it's because the defaults are working against them. So if you go to an AI chatbot, the default is that it wants everything from you. It wants to use the data you're putting in to its advantage, to OpenAI or Anthropic or whatever. They want that information. It's gold to them. So if you don't set your settings up properly and then start sticking all information in, you're giving it away for free.
Yeah.
So which privacy issues are most likely to grow the fastest in practice?
Do you want to talk about employee monitoring?
That touchy subject.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, again, the technologies are enabling that to grow quite fast as well, aren't they? So, and that hybrid, the new hybrid working that we've seen evolve since COVID, that's really, really pushed the agenda of employee monitoring. The companies want to know that people are being productive, and the technologies are then suddenly all of a sudden there to help them do that without putting the right data protection things in place to make sure you're doing it properly. You're being proportionate, it's being transparent, and it's got all of the right boxes ticked.
It's just not enough though, is it? I mean, it's like, I can remember, just after COVID, speaking to a client who had some software on his laptop to make his mouse move constantly, so that he could actually look like to the outside world, if his keyboard or his system was being monitored, he was moving his mouse around, he was working, he was live and online. And I was like, that's crazy, like, why, but it looks like I'm online, and if they're monitoring me, and I'm like, but they could be monitoring way more than that. You're not actually doing anything with that, you're just moving it around to keep your screen live, which is making you look like you're online, but it isn't necessarily doing anything. But I mean, the ICO obviously released some guidance, didn't they? They released a code of practice around employee monitoring because it's quite important. And I mean, and again, there's a time and a place for that. There are some employees who do need monitoring because maybe their behaviours, or maybe their quality of work is poor, or maybe they're, I mean, simple things. The amount of cases we get involved in, Aimee, where it's ended in a DSAR because potentially maybe someone's performance is poor and they manage them out of the business, and they're putting a subject access request, and before you know it, we're looking at things like their access controls to systems. We're looking at their swipe card entry to the building, where they're not rocking up until 9:10 and they should have been in at 8:30, and those sorts of things, all comes out in the DSAR. We see the other side of it as well, don't we? So that, they've done the employee monitoring, they've decided someone's not up to speed, they've perhaps not passed their probation, etc., and we're getting rid of them, managing them out, or they're being made redundant or whatever, and what the impact is across the rest of the business, because suddenly there's a subject access hitting in, there's an ACAS claim coming in, we're going to go to tribunal or whatever, and we end up getting involved in those. So employee monitoring, like I said, there's a time and a place.
It's not something that's brand new, because in certain industries it's been around for a long while. So for call centres, for example, if you've got an employee in a job that has KPIs, and those KPIs are through the computer they're using, because how many calls they're answering, how long they're on that call for, how many logs they're doing, whatever that industry may require them to do for that KPI, the monitoring has been there. It's the expansion of the monitoring into a more broader scope that then causes the bigger problems, and that's what's been growing over the last five years since COVID, 6 years since COVID, where people are not in the office, can't be watched visually, and therefore that technology is put in place. But going back to the software, I was actually told of a situation where someone just literally put a clock underneath their mouse, so that the hand ticking round for the seconds kept the mouse active. They didn't even need an additional software to do that.
That's quite clever.
Isn't it? There's the simpler solutions out there.
That is clever. Yeah, so I'd say employee monitoring, it's always been a big one. It's always been contentious. I mean, over the last 20 years, I remember working in an organisation where they put sneaky covert cameras in the offices, which you're absolutely not allowed to do, but they did. And that was the sort of thing, because things were being taken from the office that shouldn't have been, and technically stolen. So they started monitoring their people, which you can't do, and there's ways around what you can and can't do. That's a bit scary about the privacy intrusiveness of that. We talked a little bit recently, didn't we, on one of the previous ones of these, that around meta glasses and things like that, which I think brings us on to some smart devices that are available and out there. you've come from a almost like a call center background, haven't you, Aimee, where
Yeah.
you have to leave your mobile in your locker and all those sorts of
Yeah.
things. There's a lot of organizations that lock down their security, don't want anybody taking cameras into the workplace. But suddenly Meta glasses has changed that. People are finding all sorts of different ways to record things or to monitor other behaviors in the workplace. That's scary. I mean, with technology the way it is at the moment.
But it's also a big area of question, isn't it? So if you look at Ring doorbells, for example, they can be put down as personal household use. If you're walking around with Meta glasses on, does that still fall under that same, or does it fall under something different, especially when you're in the workplace and you're looking at business sense, commercially sensitive data, and you're looking at personal data? And so where does it fall, and how's that decision made? And it's just raising bigger questions than I think anyone ever anticipated when it came to the smart devices and wearable tech that are bringing that technology into the forefront.
Yeah, absolutely. Everything, there's recordable devices everywhere now as well, isn't there? Like recordable pens, recordable earrings, recordable necklaces. What we're going to do is start telling people they can't wear anything to come into the workplace, So it's a tricky time, isn't it? And people, this is the thing is that I say to clients, why do you think they're having to change all their policies around bring your own device to cover these things off, obviously to make sure, because it doesn't say anything in most standard bring your own device policies about Meta glasses or anything like that. But it's like, why do people feel they need to have those types of devices in the workplace? And there's a lot around protecting themselves, especially where they're maybe in a male or female dominant environment and they're concerned about issues they've got with other individuals. So people are just using these very smart pieces of technology to protect themselves. But ultimately, what does that mean for their client or customers' data when they're recording that? If they're on calls or if they're on Teams calls face to face like we are, and they're able to record the voice and the image, someone's data,
Yeah. Absolutely, and that poor data visibility that can introduce really puts in that data protection risk. And if you've not got the right things in place, or you've not got sight of that data, I mean, it expands even to your suppliers, your third-party suppliers, and what platforms you're using and where your data is stored. If you can't say what data exists, who can access it, where it's stored, how long it's kept, then you're really putting yourself at risk as an organisation.
But that comes back to square one, doesn't it, Aimee? Because we all should have been doing data mapping back in 2016 when the GDPR was first being talked about.
Yeah.
We had 2 years to get our act together for 2018. I'm still talking to clients that still haven't done that in 2026. So the thing with GDPR is, and any privacy legislation is, it's all around preparation and having your house in order and good housekeeping. Because if you've done all of the front end, then actually when things evolve, this should be quite straightforward because you already know everything you need to know. I think the problem is a lot of clients are on back foot.
Yeah, it's an organic matter, isn't it? It's not just a book that once it's written and printed and put in your folders, then it's sorted. It's an organic matter that's constantly growing, changing, and needs to be looked at on a constant basis, monthly, 6 monthly, yearly. It's got to be continuous.
Constantly evolving, isn't it? And if you're not moving with it, like I said earlier, it's all right putting policies and procedures in 2018 and forgetting they exist. So much has changed since then, hasn't it? Like with Brexit, the UK GDPR, the DUA, there's so many things changing. We need to move with the times. They need to keep on top of it. It can't just, I think they saw it as a project and then it became business as usual and they didn't touch it again. And it needs to keep moving. They need to keep abreast of what's happening out there. There's so many changes afoot.
What would you guys say that regulators are most likely to focus on next?
Well, they've got changes themselves coming up, haven't they, under the DUA? So they're looking to be a bit more relevant. They've got to kind of make those changes and make themselves stronger, really. I think that's what the DUA was trying to really do, make them a bit more independent and a bit stronger. But as we said earlier, they're going to be focusing on how accountable you are rather than just have you got the right policies in place. Can you explain what happens? Tell us why this is. And they're not going to come looking for you just because there's an incident. They're going to be looking at you in a wider scale than that, I think.
Evidence. Everything's about evidence, isn't it? Show me on your screen. Show me what you do. Let me interview your staff. Let's have a talk about it. Yes, you've got these lovely policies and procedures, but what do they mean in reality?
Yeah, I mean, they've just done, they've got their strategy for AI and automated decision making, haven't they, at the moment? So they're looking at how decisions are made, what safeguards exist, is there human involvement? And so with AI and workplace monitoring growing so quickly and so widespread, then those are the things that companies and organisations really need to start looking at if they want to be able to answer to the ICO should they come knocking.
Yeah, and I mean, we've touched on employee monitoring. I think the ICO is all over that anyway. They always have been. It's always been really important to them. Online tracking and PECA. I think it's amazing how many people don't work in organisations where PECA applies that don't know about it. That scares me. How many organisations do online marketing or any digital marketing or lots of digital communications and have no idea what PECA is?
Yeah, absolutely. They send out a load of emails to thousands of people, and there's no privacy notices, there's no opt-out, there's no soft opt-in, there's they don't understand what they're meant to be doing to protect. And the cookies, again, keep saying this needs to be a full one on its own, doesn't it? I'm not going to say much. But yeah, the cookies.
I was ramped on cookies.
The cookie banners, getting them right, keeping them up to date, doing it properly. They've just put out their final guidance on the use of storage and access technologies in April this year. So, organisations really need to look at that to get it right.
Yeah.
Because the fines are just too big now, especially under PECA.
Yeah, the days of sitting with 500,000 in the budget are long gone, aren't they?
Mm-hmm.
Just waiting for a fine, And I think as well, the previous commissioner was a little bit more around, help me to help you, because she was obviously there for the implementation of GDPR, but it's here now, guys, and you should be better. The current commissioner is more all over this. Those sloppy days are gone, and he's throwing fines around where absolutely rightly where they're needed. And if you look at the ICO action we've taken webpage, the amount around PECA, the amount around uninvited or unsolicited marketing messages is massive. The amount of work they're doing around that as well at the moment, and that's the good place to look at what the hot topics are for the commissioner. Is that what are they focused on? What are they looking at? What are the key things that are happening in their world that they're, in terms of almost the types of business areas that they're focused on.
Isn't there something else coming up as not necessarily directly under GDPR, but very similar to, is the stairs?
Yeah, the
I
stairs
don't know that much about it, but I know you've got something coming up about it, haven't you, Rachel?
We have, the stairs regulation. So whilst it's not about personal identifiable data, it has such a crossover between privacy and FOI, and I think it's going to change the landscape for a number of particular sector subject access type requests. Historically, individuals have been able to ask for their own information using DSAR, subject access requests, which we've been able to do for a lot of years. Obviously, that's been tightened under GDPR. But they were also, if they were, this is all around social tenancies. If they were a tenant of social housing under a local authority, they were able to then also submit an FOI, Freedom of Information request, to obtain information from the council about various different things. So you can ask about commercially sensitive information, you can ask around the salaries of the mayor, you can ask around, how many police officers are on duty in a city centre on one weekend. That's what FOI is about. And then obviously you've got your subject access request where you can ask information, what information a company holds about you. Well, stairs kind of sits with a foot in almost both camps. And we have got something coming up, I think, in the next few weeks about that. So we'll be giving you information around what that means to you if you are in that business sector, how you need to prepare for it, because there are two big deadlines coming, one in October and one in April. So we're going to start to help clients to get things together in time.
And obviously that's going to land on the regulators' kind of scope at some point after that comes in, isn't it?
Yeah, so the Housing Ombudsman is going to be the main regulator for it, not the Commissioner, but there's going to be such a crossover with personal data that there's no doubt that it's going to have an impact on the ICO as well. It can't not. There are going to be some crazy touch points. it's going to be an interesting time. What it is going to do, what we know is going to happen for a fact, but URM work with a number of housing associations, so we've had a really interesting insight into this, is it's going to have an impact on their disclosure teams. So anyone who processes subject access requests in housing associations is very likely this burden's going to drop on that team, because they're already qualified, they already have a view on what can and can't go. But this is a little bit different. It's kind of brand new for everyone, so it's kind of a suck it and see. So like I say, we're going to be doing something shortly to help people to prepare for that.
Absolutely, and I'll make sure we have the link to the webinar landing page in the description of this episode if anyone wants to check out that STAIRS webinar. So I think you guys have already started to touch on this a little bit, but what else should organisations do now to prepare for this next wave of scrutiny and enforcement?
It's the same thing we keep saying all the time, isn't it? Get your house in order.
Yeah.
Get your systems in order. Look at what you've got. Data mapping. I work with so many clients that still have never done that. How are you supposed to run a business when you don't know where everything is, and you don't know how old your oldest data is, and you don't know who's got access to what, where it's stored? You have to be more organised, don't you, Aimee?
Yeah. You need to have your ROPA. You need to be able to have that document that you can refer to should you need to for data subject access, or when you've got a new process of technology coming in that you can look at and go, right, well, this is the data we hold here. This is what we do with it for this. This is what we do with it for that. That ROPA is going to be your Bible for your data and your data mapping, so that you can understand it, have visibility of it, where it sits, who's got it, who accesses it. And it's going to be making your life easier when you have that in place.
We call it, don't we? We call it the single source of truth, ROPA.
Yeah.
It is your map of everything. Everything that you do around privacy hangs off your ROPA. If your ROPA is good, everything else becomes easy, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And
also prioritise your higher risk ones as well. So if you've got AI, if you've got employee monitoring technology in there, if you do use automated decision making on individuals, they're your high risk ones to prioritise when you trying to map that data, trying to get your process in place, trying to understand what's going on within your business. Start with your highest risk and then work your way down.
Yeah, and I think if we've said it once, we've said it 100 times around retention schedules. The longer you keep data, the more you need to disclose. Really narrow down what your business purpose is to retain data for as long as you do. I have some clients who retain emails for 2 years. I have some clients who still retain emails for 10 years, and they believe they have a business purpose to retain for 10 years, which is great until someone puts in a subject access and wants every email with their name in it, and then you've got 10 years worth of data to filter through. So that will help in so many ways, but ultimately will help with your DSAR process if you start to tighten your retention schedules down. Again, I work with a number of clients who don't even have one. It's so important, and that goes back to your ROPA as well, doesn't it, Aimee? Because on your ROPA it will say how long do we retain anything for. It helps you to understand where data is and how long you're keeping it for. Like I say, that becomes your single source of truth, so it's so imperative as a document.
Yeah, and I think we've said it a number of times as well, is don't have your data protection as an afterthought. Have it as one of the first questions you ask during your procurement or change process. You're bringing in new technology, first question you ask about data protection and all of those implications. You've got a new supplier coming on board, your due diligence starts, one of your first questions is data protection. It all starts at the very beginning, not as an afterthought of, oh, hang on a second, we're 6 months into this contract with this supplier and we don't know the data protection stuff.
Yeah.
It needs to be at the beginning. It needs to be built into your privacy by design, built into your procurement.
I think as well, though, certainly in my experience, historically, project teams, project leads would circumvent the data protection officer when they were, suggesting they were going to do something new. We're going to use this new AI technology. We're going to implement this new HR platform. We're going to do something different with bulk data. We're not going to ask the privacy department because they're probably going to say we can't do it. This has always been, that's historically always been, it's almost like we've got the plague, and they would circumvent us if they could. But I think they are getting better at that now. I think privacy by design, like you say, is written into the legislation. I feel like we are, as practitioners, for Aimee and I, we are less of a blocker nowadays, I think, in 2026 than we ever were. I think they're starting to see us as more, okay, like we've got the suggestion to do something. Let's get the privacy team involved. Let's work it out. Let's see. We will only stop or give advice to not do something if we feel it's such a high risk. You know, we make pragmatic decisions every day, right? Business risk is what it is. And, you know, sometimes there is risk associated with processing, and you'll go ahead and do that regardless. DPIAs, how many of those do we do? Loads of them, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, helping clients to establish what the risk is to the individuals, not their business risk, but the risk to the individual data subject, and helping them to take a view on risk management, because it all links, doesn't it? All comes back to that, making risk-based decisions.
And the big risks as well, as we've seen with some of the enforcement action that's taken place, is your third parties. If you're not doing the due diligence from a data protection aspect as well, of your third party suppliers, you know, where do they store the data? Is it transferred internationally? So are they storing it outside of the UK if you're a UK based company? What are the sub-processors are they using? Then you can, there's two really big cases that demonstrate the risk. They've got the Capita breach, which was a £14 million fine, and then you've got the NHS one through Advanced Software, which was a £3 million fine. They were the first processor to be fined by the ICO, as we know, because of embedded systematic failures, not just a one-off complex hack that happened. These breaches happened because their systems weren't right, their processes weren't right. They had embedded failures that caused the breaches. And if you're not checking your third parties properly, then you're putting yourselves at risk of that.
Yeah. And I think the Advanced Software case has sent a message out quite strongly to across the board now, saying, you know, we are coming for you. If you're not getting, you know, you've got to get your act together. You've got to be better. I mean, supply due diligence has been around a long time, hasn't it? You know,
yeah.
Supply due diligence questionnaires, you've got automated ones, you've got manual ones, but asking the right questions, nailing everything down at the beginning, at the contract stage, why wouldn't you do that? You know, why would you not want to know what you're signing up for? But there's been a lot of sloppiness around that, and that's coming back to bite a few organisations now.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for your time today, guys. If any of our listeners would like to ask Aimee and Rachel a question, you can follow the link in the description of this episode, or you can just pop it in the comments. So thank you again for chatting with me today, guys. Thank you everyone for listening, and we will see you next time. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we would really appreciate it if you could spare a moment to leave a rating or review at ratethispodcast.com/InfoSec Insider. To listen to more episodes, you can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Podbean.
Thank you for listening to URM's InfoSec Insider podcast. For more information, visit our website at urmconsulting.com.